Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining me for a closer look at these two beautiful brand new sculpts from Papo for 2019, Pentaceratops and Gorgosaurus. I'd like to start by saying thank you very much to Everything Dinosaur for getting these two figures to me so quickly. I know that they've proven to be very popular. And today I'm going to have a good look at the details and compare them to some older Papo figures to give everyone an idea of the scale and the features of these figures. And I'm going to start with the Pentaceratops. I'm just going to move this little Gorgosaurus out of the way for now. Pentaceratops, as you can see, is the larger of the two figures. It's an unusual choice. It's not a figure that you see depicted in pop culture very often, and Papo frequently referenced pop culture or other sculpts from the likes of Sideshow. I haven't seen a sculpt of any ceratopsian posed quite like this, but the sculpt of it is designed in a way that you can also tip it onto all fours. And it's sculpted so well, it looks equally as impressive on all fours or on 2 feet, which is a very clever feature. Papo figures tend to be the highest in terms of quality and complexity of the paintwork. However, they're often lacking somewhat in accuracy. So an immediate flaw with this one is apparent in the front feet. There's only 4 toes on each forefoot instead of the 5 that ceratopsians had. I'm pretty sure Pentaceratops would have as well. As far as I'm aware, the feet haven't been found, but it'd be very unlikely for it to have only 4 toes. Papo have done this before. The beautiful Dimetrodon sculpt was missing toes on the rear feet. It only had 4 toes on each rear foot. But the only other ceratopsian that they've produced that has 4 toes is the lovely little baby Triceratops here, as you can see. It's got 4 painted nails there. This figure is sadly discontinued, so if you can get a chance to pick it up, I recommend it. Pop this off to one side. And that aside, it's generally pretty good form. The skull's nice and narrow. As you can see, the eyes are in something of a binocular position. They probably would have been placed more laterally than this, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. The skull overall is a pretty good shape. One thing they have done is angle the jugal horns downwards and forwards, possibly to emphasise the fact that this is Pentaceratops, the 5-horned face. The horns weren't really that angled, but it's a nice artistic touch and it really does emphasise that this is 5-horned face. When you tip it on all fours, it nicely mirrors the Schleich figure, but you can see that the sculpt quality and the painting quality is far superior to that figure. It's a similar kind of size. Now if we look closely at it, there's all sorts of wonderful details apparent here. I love the fact there's more coarse scaling in the fenestrae of the frill here. The coloration, the differences in the size of the scales. It's a phenomenally detailed head sculpt. You can see the sort of crinkle effect around the underside of the beak. It's very organic looking. The inside of the mouth is sculpted, a sort of ribbed palate. Papo don't tend to put an avian or reptilian palate. They do tend to go for this ribbed type look. Nicely sculpted nostril. Beautiful blazing orange eye. You can see all the subtlety and the textures and the paintwork here. They've gone for a somewhat cracked look to the horns, which is a little unusual. I love the patterns radiating up to the frill. It's not too flashy, the colour scheme. It's very subtle, but very, very bold and striking nonetheless, as you can see. I like the way they've got this charcoal colour radiating upwards from the ecoccipitals to the frill. As you can see, the horns, rather than being painted a solid colour, they're graded. There are several different colours going on in the horns, and also these horns around the top of the frill as well. You can see there's a lot of coloration going on in those. They're not painted a single solid colour like horns often are in toy dinosaurs. With the sculpt, you can see the musculature of the figure. They have obviously done some research, or at least looked at something that was reasonably accurate reconstruction, because Pentaceratops, unlike a lot of ceratopsians, didn't have a similar shaped body. It did have a bit of an arched back. It also had a bit of a kink down towards the hips, which isn't apparent. I think the spine is possibly a little exaggerated, but nonetheless it's nice to see that. The details on the hide and the back, absolutely gorgeous. It really does have a very organic look to it. You see a sort of elephantine detailing on the underside here. The belly and the chest muscles. It's got a very solid feel to it. There's nothing sagging or hanging. And in this particular one, I've even included a cloacal slit, which is unusual for a Papo dinosaur. It's always nice to see it. Adds a little bit more life to the figure. You can even see that there's coloration on the back of the frill. They've continued this pattern, very, very finely painted, down from the egg occipitals. Looking down to the rear feet. There's 4 toes present and correct, although the inner toe is possibly a little high. It should probably be in contact with the ground. It's a peculiar little bulbosity on the rear right foot. I'm not too sure what that is, whether it's just a sculptural artifact or whether it's a manufacturing artifact, but it could quite easily be a pathology or something that's happened to this dinosaur in its life, if you can imagine that. It's a good, large, hefty figure. The paintwork, the colour scheme, very naturalistic but very striking. It's got this fine row of spines down the back, which are picked out in a paler colour. And this charcoal colour is broken up by these lovely russet spots. And then it comes to an olive green down the flanks and fades to this beautiful peachy cream colour. And these spots really do make the figure very striking, they really make it pop. And Papo figures are never to any particular scale, they're not to scale with each other. As Pentaceratops was a similar kind of size and weight to Styracosaurus. Now the Papo Styracosaurus I have right here. This figure shares a body sculpt with the now discontinued Pachyrhinosaurus, which is also a figure worth picking up if you get a chance. But you can see immediately that the Pentaceratops towers over the Styracosaurus. They've both got a very interesting paint scheme. The Styracosaurus is not quite as complicated, but as you can see, there's still superb attention to detail on this little figure. It's still a very striking pose. Even when Papo do reference pop culture, they always manage to put their figures in an unusual, sometimes controversial poses. But I do appreciate the fact with the Pentaceratops that they've managed to make it look interesting both on all fours and rearing up. Either way, it's got a great sense of drama. I also appreciate the fact that following their experiment with doing an articulated jaw on an ornithischian last year, they have not repeated that with the Pentaceratops, because whilst this iguanodon is a very beautiful sculpt, this very finely engineered jaw does somewhat detract from the appearance of the face. Now the Pentaceratops, it's a large figure. It's not quite as large as Papo's Jurassic Park style Triceratops here. But as you can see, it is a far finer sculpt, there's a far more detail, it's far more complicated paintwork. It's generally a better figure altogether. As you can see, the claws on the feet of the Triceratops are all one colour, and there's not a lot to it compared to the Pentaceratops. It's still a very beautiful figure and still, considerably more complicated and well accomplished than many other dinosaur figures, but it's somewhat out of date and very much has its place in its time, and that has passed. So, on to the next one. Now of the two, this one is possibly my favourite, and I suspect this is probably going to become one of my favourite Papo dinosaurs ever. It's a very small figure, this Gorgosaurus. I had seen pictures and I was still surprised when I opened it at how small it is. It's a very dainty little figure, but no less detailed for it. In fact, sometimes Papo dinosaurs are more complex in their sculpt, in their paintwork, when they are smaller. Here we have it compared to this big Jurassic Park style, very banana-toothed green version 1 Papo Rex. Always like this figure because it reminds me very much of the scene at the end of Jurassic Park when the banner comes down when dinosaurs ruled the earth. So I've always had a soft spot for this figure, but you can see immediately how flawed it is. So the pronated hands and those big banana teeth. Still a very beautiful figure, very much worth picking up. But in terms of detail and accuracy, this new little Gorgosaurus is vastly superior. It's nice to see a tyrannosaurid that is a slightly different species to Tyrannosaurus sculpted so well. People have compared it to the Walking with Dinosaurs one. It's an unusual pose. This peculiar squat with the head raised looking at you. I love the expression on the face. Looks a little bit crazy. The elbows are sticking out a little, but the hands are uncinnated. They're actually in the correct orientation. There's an awful lot of complexity to the paintwork here. Whoever designed the paint scheme has really gone to town with it, and the articulated jaw is very smooth. They've started putting more muscular detail on the insides of the jaws of the dinosaurs. This connection, this muscle from the top of the jaw, seemed to start with the Velociraptor figure, which was produced a few years ago. And it allows the jaw to be opened far wider. Again, this is a very beautiful figure, a very complicated figure. It is possibly the most eerie and disturbing feathered dinosaur I've ever seen. I'm just going to shift Rexy here because he's interfering with the focus. As you can see, when the jaw's closed, the lips are still pulled back, showing the teeth, giving it a slightly goofy grin. There's not a lot about it which really argues Velociraptor. It's Velociraptor in name only. It's not remotely accurate, this one, but it's a nice try. Again, like all Papo dinosaurs, very, very complicated sculpturally and paintwork-wise. And it's a similar kind of size to the Gorgosaurus and a similar kind of weight. The Gorgosaurus is slightly heavier. As you can see, there's slightly more heft to it, but overall they're a very similar kind of size. I'll put this beautiful Velociraptor away for now. Gorgosaurus was contemporaneous with Styracosaurus. As you can see, the Styracosaurus towers over it. So maybe this is a juvenile animal. Like I said before, Papo figures are not to scale. Now this particular figure, I really like the paintwork on this one. The nostrils beautifully picked out with a little bit of pink. Beautiful blazing eye set in a darker surrounding. A lot of modern animals have a darker surround around the eye. You see how fine the teeth are and how well detailed the inside of the mouth is. Again, you've got that ribbed palate. A lot of these larger scales on the underside of the jaw. Larger scales up the snout here, which tyrannosaurs are thought to have had. It's possibly a little bit shrink wrapped, this skull, and most toy manufacturers haven't caught up with the idea of putting lips on the theropods yet. Again, it's still quite a contentious idea, but it's kind of swinging in favour of that. Either way, I like them how they look either way, and I'm not going to worry too much about that. This fenestral opening here is quite tight. It's still in a sort of Greg Paul type style, but it's picked out nicely with a tone of green, which you don't find anywhere else on the body of this figure, which just goes to show you how complicated these are. And if you look at the paint scheme overall, got this lovely chocolate tone on the back with these black stripes breaking it up, making it dappled and camouflaged. Very appropriate for a forest animal. And it fades down to this more caramelly colour. And then tones of peach and pink with the caramel spots. The caramel continues up and there's a little blush of it on either cheek. Really very organic, neat looking. And then you've got these darker black patches behind the neck. Really sets off the head nicely and reflects the eye. It really is very, very artistic and very well done. The underside, this pale greyish blue throat to the peachy chest, to the palish grey reflecting the throat on the belly, and then back to this peachy colour on the underside. The tail's perhaps a little short, but you can see the muscles along it. The legs are nice and long and slim. Again, this is a peculiar posture, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. Mine has a slightly twisted claw on this foot. Again, I like a little bit of oddness like this. It gives them a bit of character. And it's also a similar kind of size to Papo's highly underrated Dilophosaurus. It's not as shiny, fortunately. I don't know why the Dilophosaurus is so shiny. I'll put my teeth back in. It's an interesting choice. I know there was a theory that maybe there were fish eaters, kind of like the Baryonyx. I know the Baryonyx is quite a shiny figure as well. So it being shiny kind of suggests that it's wet. But I don't know why they don't with the Dilophosaurus. The Dilophosaurus colour scheme is actually very similar to the baby Triceratops. It's also not entirely dissimilar to the Iguanodon, but those two came out the same year, and I do wonder if there's a prototype of either of these figures somewhere, which is actually a different colour scheme, and maybe Papo were just having a lean year with this one. I've always felt this figure would actually look quite nice with the rainbow colour scheme. Overall, looking at both these figures, they're extraordinarily well implemented. Very, very well done. Yes, it costs a little bit more, but you really do get something quite special for your money. And I can't recommend them highly enough. In terms of collecting dinosaurs, as long as they meet one of 3 of my criteria, which is that the price is low enough, that's probably the 4th one, but as long as they've got high production values, as long as they're very artistic, and as long as they're accurate, as long as they tick one of those 3 boxes, they tend to find their way into my collection. And Papo generally tick 2 of them. If they manage to tick all 3, it's generally by accident rather than design, I feel. Because accuracy really doesn't seem to be on their mind, but you always get a beautiful representation of a prehistoric animal with Papo. And this one is no exception. So again, thank you to Everything Dinosaur. You can order these from Everything Dinosaur, or you can email them and they will put you on the reserve list for these figures, because I know they've been very, very popular. In other news, we've got 2 new figures coming from Eofauna in the autumn, and they're starting their reveals. So if you follow Everything Dinosaur's blog, and if you follow Eofauna too, you'll get more information about that incoming very shortly. And I hope you've enjoyed a better look at these 2 figures, and I'll see you in the next video.